If you're into morgue horror stories, get ready, because what you're about to hear today is going to mess with your mind. Accounts from professionals who witnessed things that defy any explanation and that they still can't forget to this day. Like in the story you're about to see, where during the autopsy of a drowned child, something simply impossible happens. The body lets out a sigh and does something even more unbelievable. But before we dive into the story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying tales. The body arrived on that winter night, brought in by two rescue workers who could barely bring themselves to look at the black bag where she lay. I had seen a lot in the morgue, but when I unzipped the bag and saw that little girl, I couldn't help but shudder. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, her skin pale as wax, dark hair matted to her face by remnants of the river where they found her. Her lips were blue, her thin arms crossed over her chest as if someone had tried to lay her to rest peacefully, drowning with hypothermia, according to the preliminary report. Routine, I thought, until things stopped being routine. My assistant, Charles, was already preparing the slides and instruments when I started the external examination. The room was cold, as always, but that day the air felt heavier, as if something was watching us. I ignored the feeling, chalking it up to fatigue. The child had been dead for hours, there was no doubt. Her skin was cold, her pupils fixed and dilated. Still, when I picked up the scalpel, I felt a hesitation I had never felt before. It was as if some part of my brain was screaming at me not to touch her. I made the first incision, and that's when it happened. The girl suddenly arched her back, as if she had been shocked. I recoiled, almost dropping the scalpel. Before I could process what I was seeing, her lungs filled with air with a wet, horrible sound, and then she spoke. "I'm cold." The voice came out hoarse, broken, as if it had been pulled from somewhere very far away. Charles took a step back, bumping into the counter. I swear my heart stopped. For a moment I was paralyzed, looking at that child who, by all medical signs, was dead. Dead for hours. "Charles, check her vital signs," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My hands trembled as I picked up the stethoscope. He approached, pale, and pressed his fingers against her neck. Nothing. No pulse. No sign of life. When I placed the stethoscope on her chest, there was only silence. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the body relaxed. The girl was dead again. What the hell was that? Charles was breathing fast, his eyes wide. I had no answer. I reviewed everything. Reflexes, pupillary responses, brain activity. Nothing. It was as if that moment had never happened. But it did. I heard it, I saw it. I decided to call the doctor who had declared her death, an experienced guy from the ER. When he answered, I didn't even know how to explain. "Doctor, the child." She moved. She spoke. On the other end of the line, a heavy silence. "That's impossible," he replied, but I heard the doubt in his voice. "Post-mortem spasms happen, but speaking? I know what I saw." He came to the morgue in person, reviewed the records, the exams. Nothing explained what had happened. No error, no sign that she could have survived, even for seconds. His conclusion was the same as mine, on paper. Muscle spasm, maybe air escaping from the respiratory tract, creating the illusion of speech. But we both knew that didn't cover everything. I finished the autopsy with cold hands, noting the cause of death as drowning, but the words felt empty. Something about that girl wasn't right. Something about that night wasn't right. As I closed the report, a question pounded in my head. What if she wasn't really dead when they brought her in? What if, somewhere between life and death, she was still trapped, feeling everything? Charles had already gone home, but I stayed there, looking at the body covered by the white sheet. The room was too silent, and for the first time in years, I was afraid to be alone with the dead. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that little girl's face, her blue lips moving, the voice coming from a place that shouldn't exist. "I'm cold." 3 words that made no sense. 3 words that made me question everything I thought I knew about death. The next day, I returned to the morgue earlier than usual. The room was empty, silent. Only the low hum of the refrigerators where the bodies were kept. The girl was still there, awaiting release for burial. I didn't need to see her again, but something drew me there. Need to check. Need to be sure it wasn't just my tired mind playing tricks. I opened the drawer and pulled the white sheet slowly. She was there, motionless, pale, dead. But then, why did the air get colder as I approached? Why did I feel that chill on the back of my neck, as if someone was breathing right behind me? My cell phone vibrated in my pocket and I almost jumped. It was Charles. "Boss, are you there? I need to talk to you." His voice was strange, hurried. "What is it?" I asked, still looking at the girl, as if she might move again at any moment. "I did some research. That child, she wasn't the first." The blood ran slower in my veins. "What do you mean?" 2 years ago, a similar case. A boy, also drowned. The coroner at the time recorded involuntary movement during the exam, but no one took it seriously. Only, he paused and I heard him swallow hard. The guy who did the autopsy killed himself a week later. A heavy silence fell between us. I looked back at the girl, and that's when I noticed something I had missed before. On her back, almost hidden among the strands of wet hair, there was a mark. Small, irregular, as if someone had pressed a finger there hard. A purple, almost black bruise. It was a sign I had seen before. In drowning cases, sometimes victims who struggle against something or someone in the water develop these marks. But this didn't seem natural. It seemed intentional. I went to the files and pulled up the record of the boy Charles mentioned. When I saw the photo of the body, my stomach turned. In the same area, on the back, there was an almost identical mark. Something, or someone, was leaving a trail. That night I decided to stay late, reviewing everything alone. The autopsy room was deserted, just me and the hum of the fluorescent lights. That's when I heard it. A whisper. "I'm cold." This time it didn't come from the table. It came from behind me. I turned so fast I almost fell. Nothing there, just the corridor door, slightly ajar. But the air was freezing. And then, in the darkest corner of the room, I saw a shadow moving. It wasn't an illusion. It wasn't fatigue. It was a small figure, hunched over like a child cowering. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Who's there?" My voice came out trembling. No answer. Just the sound of drops hitting the floor. Drip, drip, drip. I looked down. Water. Water dripping from something that hadn't been there before. A small trail, as if someone had just come out of a river. And then, the light flickered. When it came back on, the shadow was closer. I didn't wait to see the rest. I ran, leaving everything behind. The next day, the girl's body was released for burial. I didn't sign the papers. I didn't look at her again. But to this day, when I'm alone in the morgue, I hear the sound of drops on the floor. And sometimes, I feel a cold that doesn't come from the air conditioning, because some things don't rest. And some marks aren't made by the hands of the living. How bizarre. I really want to know what you thought of the story. What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Share your opinion in the comments below. What happened there was, without a doubt, something that defies any explanation. And as bizarre as it may seem, such situations are not as rare as you might imagine. Like in the story you're about to see now, where a simple midnight call turned into a real nightmare. I've seen some things in this morgue that I wouldn't dare say out loud. But nothing compares to what happened that October night when they brought in the body of Mr. Alvaro Mendoza. The guy had been found in a shallow grave on the outskirts of Mexico City, in an overgrown vacant lot. When the police dug him up, they saw right away that something was very wrong. Dirt in his mouth, nose under his nails, as if he had tried to dig his way out. And his eyes, wide open, glazed but open, as if he had died staring at the sky, begging for help. When the body arrived at my table, I already felt a chill. It wasn't the first time I'd seen a corpse in bad condition, but this one had a different energy, a heavy feeling, as if the air around him was colder. My assistant, Raphael, even joked, "Doc, it's like they brought us a passenger straight from the death train." I didn't laugh. I put on my gloves, grabbed the scalpel, and started the examination. Everything seemed normal at first. Rigor mortis, lividity, temperature. But when I turned his head to examine the back of his neck, it happened. Alvaro's right eye moved. It wasn't a tremor. It wasn't a reflex from the light. It was a slow, deliberate movement, as if he was staring at me. I almost dropped the scalpel. "Raphael, did you see that?" The guy was as white as a sheet. "Doc, for the love of God, he's dead, right? Dead men don't blink." I rushed to the heart monitor and placed the electrodes. Nothing, no pulse, no brain activity, no breathing. That body was as dead as a rock. But the eyes, his eyes still seem alive in my head. I decided to continue the autopsy, trying to ignore the chill down my spine. When I opened his stomach, I found traces of atropine and succinylcholine, two poisons that paralyze but don't kill. Someone had drugged Alvaro, left him unable to move, and then buried him alive. The police were notified immediately. Detective Torres, a tough guy who had seen it all, turned green when I explained. "So, you're telling me the man was buried conscious?" I just nodded. There was no other explanation. They started investigating, and it didn't take long to find out that Alvaro had a partner, a guy named Eduardo Vasquez. The two had a business together, and witnesses said they had been fighting over money. When the police went to Eduardo's house, they found a shovel with fresh dirt and a bottle of atropine in the trash. The guy didn't even try to deny it, but all that came later. That night, in the morgue, there was only me, Raphael, and Alvaro Mendoza's corpse, with his eyes still open. I swear that when I closed the refrigerator door, I heard a sigh, a low sound, almost a moan, as if someone was relieved to finally rest. Raphael looked at me, eyes wide. "Doc, did you hear that?" I heard it, but I chose to believe it was the wind, because the alternative was to accept that somewhere between life and death, Alvaro Mendoza was still trapped, and that, for an instant, he had managed to warn us. After the police took Eduardo away, I thought the nightmare was over, but the morgue was never the same again. That same week, I started hearing things. Footsteps in the empty corridor when I was the only one there. The sound of someone breathing deeply behind me, but when I turned, nothing. Even Raphael, who was a hardcore skeptic, confessed that he felt a presence in the cold room. "Doc, it's like someone is always watching when we turn our backs." And the equipment started to fail. Monitors turning on and off by themselves, the refrigeration system spiking in temperature. One night, the examination computer turned on in the middle of the night, with a single file open, Alvaro's report. On the screen, in red letters, it only said, "I didn't want to die." I deleted it immediately. I told myself it was a virus, that someone had hacked the system. But deep down, I knew. The last straw was when Alvaro's body disappeared. It simply vanished from the refrigerator. The police searched everywhere, but there was no sign of him. Until the night watchman, old Carmelo, pulled me aside. "Doc, I saw him." The old man was trembling. "Last night I saw Mr. Mendoza walking through the parking lot. He was covered in dirt and his eyes, God help me, his eyes looked like two dark holes." The next day, Eduardo Vasquez was found dead in his cell. The guards swore the door was locked, but his body was full of dirt, as if he had been buried alive inside that cell, his mouth and nose stuffed with mud. That night, I decided to stay late to finish the paperwork, alone. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't afraid of ghosts. That's when the light flickered. And then, in the corner of the room, someone sat in the empty chair. I saw no face, heard no voice, just a dark silhouette, heavy, as if the air had become denser there. And a smell, Wet, rotten earth, that same smell from Alvaro's body when I first opened the plastic bag. My hands turned cold. Alvaro? The chair creaked as if someone had leaned forward. And then, a whisper. It didn't come through my ears. It came straight into my mind like a thought that wasn't mine. Now he knows how it was. The light came back on. The chair was empty. The next day I quit. Raphael did too. The morgue closed for renovations a month later, but I know the truth. Sometimes I still drive by there at night, and I swear that in the dark windows you can see figures moving, as if someone inside is still trying to dig their way out. What a horror. There are things that even those who deal with the supernatural can't quite understand. And if you think that was heavy, just wait, because the next story involves a place where, to this day, no one can stay alone for too long. And there's a reason for that. The night was cold when the ambulance arrived at the Montreal morgue, bringing in a body that even the paramedics didn't want to touch. You could smell it before they even unzipped the bag. That sweet, heavy odor of rotting flesh mixed with something else. Something strange. Something that wasn't just death. I was the first on shift that night, and when I pulled the zipper, I nearly gagged. The guy inside looked like he'd been in a damp basement for weeks. Grayish skin, almost green in some spots, clinging to his bones like wet paper. His eyes were sunken, nearly dried out, but his mouth was slightly open, as if he'd tried to scream before he died. Drowning victim from the St. Charles River, the attendant said, avoiding looking directly at the body. Been there at least since last week. I followed the usual protocol, took the temperature, checked the signs of decomposition, noted the details. But when I turned to grab the camera, something made me look back. The fluorescent light of the morgue hit the corpse's skin, and for a second, I swore the color changed. Less pale, more human. You're seeing things, Mark, I muttered to myself. I've worked with the dead for 15 years. I know what bad lighting and fatigue can do, but it wasn't fatigue. When I came back with the camera, the guy's skin was different. It wasn't just the color, the texture too. The muscles in his arm, which had been slack and peeling away from the bone, seemed firmer, as if they were regenerating. Shit. I called the nurse on duty, Claudette. She came in laughing, thinking I was making up stories to scare her, but her smile died when she touched the corpse's arm. Mark, this is warm. It wasn't possible. Bodies don't warm up after death. They don't rejuvenate. We ran the basic tests. No pulse, no breathing, fixed pupils. Technically, he was still dead, but the skin kept changing, as if something inside was working, repairing what death had ruined. We made an emergency call to the head of pathology, Dr. Lefebvre. While we waited, I couldn't take my eyes off the body. With each passing minute, he looked less decomposed. His lips gained color, the tendons in his neck became visible under the skin, which now had a pinkish hue. When Lefebvre arrived, he looked at me as if I'd gone mad, until he put on his gloves and examined the body. Putain de merde. We collected samples, ran toxicology tests, checked for any rare infections or parasites. Nothing. No signs of abnormal bacterial activity, no indication that this was possible. And the body? The body kept changing. By the time the sun began to rise, the corpse no longer looked like a corpse. He looked like a sleeping man. A man who had died days ago, but now had smooth skin, defined muscles. Even his nails seemed to have grown. And then, as I approached with the stethoscope, I swear on everything sacred, I heard a breath. Faint, almost imperceptible. But it was a breath. Inside that dead man's chest. My heart nearly jumped out of my throat when that faint sound echoed in the stethoscope. A breath. A damn breath of air where there should have been nothing. My hand trembled as I removed the device, and I looked at Lefebvre, hoping he would say I had imagined it. But his face was as white as his lab coat. Again, he ordered, his voice dry. I placed the stethoscope back on, pressing harder. This time it wasn't just a breath, it was a heartbeat. Weak, irregular, but undeniable. Something inside that chest was moving. Claudette backed up until she hit the wall. This is impossible. she whispered, covering her mouth with her hands. Lefebvre didn't waste time. He called the entire team, had them bring the emergency equipment, as if we were going to revive a patient, not examine a corpse. But what were we supposed to do? Declare that he was coming back to life? As the other doctors rushed in, I stood there, staring at that man. His eyes were still closed, but his eyelids twitched, as if he were dreaming. The skin, which hours before had been rotting, now had a healthy glow. Even his hair, once matted and dirty, looked more alive. The heart monitor was turned on, and the graphs began to jump. It wasn't a normal rhythm. It was slow, uneven, like a sputtering engine, but it was a rhythm. "Someone explain this," Lefebvre growled, looking at each of us as if we were hiding something. No one answered. The silence in the morgue was heavy, broken only by the intermittent beep, beep of the machine. That's when the corpse moved its finger. A small spasm, almost imperceptible. But I saw it. Everyone saw it. Claudette let out a little scream and stepped back. One of the technicians made the sign of the cross. Lefebvre, usually so composed, took a step back, as if expecting the dead man to sit up on the table at any moment. Me? I couldn't stop looking at his hand. The tendons moving under the skin, the fingers slowly contracting, as if remembering how they worked. Then, without warning, the man's chest rose in a long, deep sigh, and his eyes opened. It wasn't a normal opening, slow, like someone waking up. It was fast, violent. His eyelids snapped open, and what I saw made me freeze. His pupils were black, not dark. Black as ink, no white, no iris, just two bottomless holes staring at us. And then, his mouth moved. No sound came out. No moan, no word. Just his lips parting, as if he were trying to speak but couldn't. The entire room was paralyzed. Even the heart monitor stopped beeping. It was Lefebvre who broke the silence. "Turn it off," he ordered, pointing to the monitor. The technician obeyed, and the beeping ceased. But the body kept breathing, slowly, deeply, as if it were preparing for something. For a moment, no one moved. The air in the morgue grew heavy, laden with a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. That man, if he could still be called a man, continued to stare at us with those black eyes, his mouth slightly open in a silent sigh. I felt a weight on my chest, as if something were pressing on my breath. Claudette gripped my arm so tightly it hurt. Lefebvre, always the skeptic, seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Then the corpse sat up. It wasn't a slow, pained movement like someone weak getting up. It was fast, too fast. His torso rose as if moved by invisible strings, and his head turned to look directly at me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even breathe. His lips moved again, and this time a sound came out. It wasn't a human voice. It was something deeper, more broken, as if it had come from a place that shouldn't exist. "Among you already know." His voice didn't just come from his mouth. It came from the walls, from the floor, from the air itself. Claudette let out a muffled scream, and the technician fell backward, crashing into a tray of instruments. Lefebvre was the only one who tried to act. "Restrain him," he ordered, advancing with a sedative syringe. But the corpse just smiled. A wide smile, too wide, as if his mouth were tearing at the edges. And then, before Lefebvre could get close, the body collapsed back onto the table. Dead. Again. This time, for good. The skin turned pale again. The muscles relaxed, and the eyes closed on their own, as if they had never opened. The heart monitor, when we turned it back on, showed only a flat line. No breath. No heartbeat. Just silence. Lefebvre examined the body with trembling hands, but there was nothing unusual anymore. It was just a corpse. An ordinary corpse. But we knew. Something had happened there. Something that no test, no report, no scientific explanation could justify. The case was filed as natural death by drowning. None of those who were there that night spoke about what they saw. Claudette requested a transfer. The technician started drinking. Lefebvre never mentioned it again. And me? I still hear that breath sometimes when the morgue is empty. And worse. Sometimes I swear I hear laughter, but I don't tell anyone, because some secrets are better left dead. Unbelievable, right? And look, those who lived through it guarantee it wasn't imagination. And if you think you've seen it all, I guarantee what comes next will make you even more suspicious of reality. Because what happened in this next account simply has no logical explanation. But before we continue with the story, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying our stories, so go ahead and like to let YouTube know you enjoy this type of content, and don't miss any more horror stories. The first thing that caught my attention was the smell. Not that typical odor of death, of advanced decomposition. No, this body was still relatively preserved. It was something more metallic, like old iron and damp earth clinging to the back of my throat. The black bag where she was found barely concealed the contours of her body, and when the zipper was opened, the fluorescent light of the morgue seemed to flicker, as if hesitating to reveal what lay inside. Emily Carter, 34 years old, brown hair already tangled with leaves and mud, skin too pale even for a corpse. The marks on her skull left no doubt. Someone had hit her, hard, more than once. The broken ribs suggested the violence didn't stop there. But what really got to me was what wasn't there. Nothing in her hand, nothing in her pockets. No wallet, no documents, no crumpled piece of paper. Just that simple dress, stained with dirt and something darker. It was during the examination that the strangeness began. The body was clean on the outside, but when I turned the thoracic cavity, something glinted under the light. Small, discreet. A ring. It wasn't on her finger. It wasn't wrapped in a piece of cloth. It was inside her, as if it had been swallowed and, by some macabre miracle, had stopped there, intact. The ring was simple, worn silver, and when I cleaned it, I saw the inscription, "Forever yours." At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe an object lost during burial, something that had fallen into the body by accident. But rings don't fall inside cadavers, and this one was too clean to have been forgotten there. That's when I called the detective in charge, Harris. He arrived with that tired look of someone who had seen it all, but even he frowned when I showed him the ring. "This wasn't in the initial report," he said, turning the object between his fingers. "No personal effects were found with the body." "That's right," I replied, "but it was inside her." Harris was quiet for a second, that silence that says this isn't going to end well. He took out his cell phone, typed something, and after a few minutes looked at me with an expression that wasn't exactly surprise. It was more like recognition. "There's a jeweler in town who does custom engravings. I'm going to stop by there." I shouldn't have gotten involved. My job was just the examination, delivering the results and moving on. But something about that scene wouldn't leave my mind. Why bury a body with nothing? Why leave it in a shallow grave, as if they wanted it to be found? And why the hell was a ring inside the corpse? When Harris returned, he wasn't alone. He brought a file, a missing person report. Emily Carter, married, missing for 3 months. The husband, a certain Daniel Carter, said she had left after a fight, that she had left a note, taken some things, and never returned. Only the note was never found, and the things she supposedly took, nothing was missing from the house. Harris looked at me, and I knew what he was going to say before he even opened his mouth. The jeweler confirmed it. This ring was custom made for Daniel, a wedding gift. And then came the question neither of us wanted to ask out loud. How did a gift from the husband end up inside the dead wife? The morgue was never a quiet place. There's always the noise of the freezers, footsteps in the corridor, water running. But at that moment, it seemed like even the air had stopped. Because there, on that cold table, Emily Carter wasn't just another body. She had a name, a story, and it seemed a message. We just didn't know yet how much that message would haunt us. The jeweler not only confirmed that the ring was Daniel's, he also remembered Emily. He said she had come in alone about 2 weeks before her disappearance, wanting to make an identical copy of the wedding ring. At the time, The shop owner thought it was strange. Why would someone make a replica of their own wedding ring? But she insisted, paid in cash, and left quickly as if she didn't want to be seen. Harris almost crushed the report in his hand when he heard this. She knew he was going to do something, he muttered. She made a copy to prove something. But prove what? That their marriage was a sham? That Daniel wasn't the man he claimed to be? Or that she knew he was capable of killing her? We went to their house. Daniel still lived there, as if nothing had happened. When Harris showed him the ring, the guy turned pale. Not in that dramatic movie way. It was a slow paleness, as if the blood had been sucked out of him little by little. He swallowed hard and said the one thing a guilty man says when he's cornered. "Where did you find this?" Harris didn't waste time. "Inside your wife." The silence that followed was so heavy you could hear the clock on the wall ticking off each second. Daniel looked at the ring, then at us, and then, finally, the realization hit. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat in the chair, hands trembling, and spoke softly. She swallowed it. The confession came in pieces. He and Emily had a big fight that night. She found out he was cheating on her, and it wasn't the first time. This time, however, she threatened to go to the police, to show the messages, the photos, everything. He lost his temper, hit her, more than once. When he realized what he had done, it was too late. "I didn't mean to do this," he said, as if that changed anything. But the part that even gave Harris chills was what happened next. Daniel said that when she was on the floor, barely breathing, she took the ring off her finger and swallowed it. She looked straight at him as she did it, like a final "screw you," as if to say, "You'll never get rid of me." He buried the body in the forest, cleaned the scene, and made up the story about the note. He thought that without the body, without evidence, no one would suspect. But he forgot one detail. Corpses talk. And Emily left a very clear message. On the way back, Harris was quiet. So was I. Until then, it was just another case of a crime of passion. Sad, but common. Only something didn't fit. Why did Emily make a copy of the ring? Why did she swallow the original? And, most importantly, where was the copy? That's when Harris's car radio crackled. It was the lab. They had found something on Emily's clothes, something we hadn't seen before. "Doctor, you need to come back here." The technician's voice came through broken. "There's another ring." And it wasn't inside the body. It was outside the bag, as if someone had placed it there afterward. When we returned to the morgue, the technician was holding a small evidence bag. Inside, a perfect replica of Emily's ring. The same inscription, "Forever yours." But there was something different. This time the words were scratched, as if someone had tried to erase them forcefully. Harris took the bag and frowned. This was outside the body bag? The technician nodded, pale, wrapped in the zipper, as if someone had placed it there on purpose. The problem? No one had access to that room except the forensic team, and no one at all, had opened that bag after the body arrived. A cold draft cut through the room, even with the windows closed. The technician looked back, nervous. "Did you feel that?" I ignored it, blamed it on the ventilation system. But when I approached the table where Emily's body still lay, I noticed something was wrong. The light above her flickered, weak, as if it were about to burn out. And then, I swear by everything, the zipper of the black bag moved on its own. Just a little. A metallic creak, almost a whisper. Harris looked at me. "Did you see that?" Before I could answer, his radio burst with static. A distant voice, so low it was barely understandable, whispered 3 words. "Forever. With Uidua." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. Even the technician, who was a hardcore skeptic, took a step back. It was Harris who broke the mood. "This is already giving me the creeps. Let's finish the job." Daniel was arrested that same day. The copy of the ring. We never found out who placed it there, The weirdest thing is that the morgue cameras didn't show anyone approaching that room. Just the wind, just the darkness. But I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. A few days later, I received a call from the prison. Daniel had been found dead in his cell, choked. The guards said he was screaming about someone trying to shove something down his throat. When they searched his body, they found a small scratch in his esophagus, shaped like a ring. Sometimes when the morgue is empty, I still hear a noise. A metallic click, like a zipper being opened. And I don't need to look to know. In the darkness, somewhere, Emily is still here. With her ring, with her message. And now, with the man who swore to love her forever. Scary, right? Did you like the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion here in the comments. I saw something in that recording that shouldn't have existed. Something that no camera, no surveillance system, no logic could explain. And worse, I was the only one who had seen it. It all started on a rainy Tuesday night when the morgue was emptier than usual. Just me and the security guard, Mike, who stayed at the front desk smoking cigarettes and watching videos on his phone. I was finishing the report on an elderly man who had arrived that afternoon from an abandoned nursing home after it went bankrupt. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another body awaiting release. Then the phone rang. It was Mike, his voice a bit shaky. "Doc, I think you need to take a look at the cameras. There's something strange." I went down to the surveillance room and he pointed at the screen with a trembling finger. In the black and white images, you could see the main corridor, lit only by the dim emergency light. And there, between the refrigerator doors, something moved. A shadow. It wasn't a leak. It wasn't a reflection. It was a human figure. But wrong. Too thin, with arms too long, dragging itself along the floor as if it were crawling. "When did this happen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "About 10 minutes ago. I was doing my rounds and didn't see anything. It only showed up on the camera." We reviewed the video frame by frame. The shadow came from nowhere, passed in front of the door of refrigerator 3B, right where the old man from the nursing home was, and then disappeared into the dark. No door had been opened. No alarm had gone off. I decided to investigate. I grabbed the key and went to refrigerator 3B, with Mike hesitating behind me. When I opened the door, the cold air hit my skin, but what really gave me chills was what I saw. The old man's body wasn't in the position I had left it in. I had examined him personally just hours before, lying on his back, arms at his sides. Now he was on his side, as if he had turned himself. And the worst part, his right hand was stretched out, fingers curled as if he had tried to grab something before he died. "Someone's been here," I said, more to myself. Mike looked at me, pale. "Doc, no one came in here. I swear." I went back to the examination table with the body, determined to understand what was happening. That's when I saw the mark on his wrist. A deep groove, as if he had been tied with something very tight before he died. And it wasn't recent. The skin had scarred around it, indicating that he had lived with it for some time. I picked up the preliminary report and started rereading it. The elderly man had been found in the basement of the nursing home, along with 3 others, all in a state of decomposition. At first, it seemed like death by neglect, abandonment. But that mark, that wasn't normal. That's when I decided to do a deeper analysis. I collected blood samples, tissue, anything that could give me an answer. And it was under the microscope that I found something that made my stomach turn. Traces of a paralytic agent, something that keeps a person completely immobile, conscious but unable to move or scream. He hadn't died of hunger or cold. He had been left there, tied up, unable to ask for help, until his body simply gave up. As I looked at that wrinkled face, the eyes half open as if still pleading for help, a question pounded in my head. What the hell did that shadow want with him? And what if it was still there, watching us now? I couldn't get that image out of my head. That old man, tied up, paralyzed, abandoned in the dark. And now something was wandering the morgue at night, as if it had come to claim what was its own. I decided to take the case to the police. I showed them the images, the marks on the wrist, the paralytic agent in the blood. The police chief was quiet for a long time before speaking. This case is reopened. The nursing home already had a history, reports of abuse, missing patients, even a lawsuit for embezzlement, but no one had imagined something so cruel. We went to the place, which was abandoned, with moldy walls and a smell of expired medicine in the air. The basement was worse. There were dirty mattresses on the floor, rusty chains attached to the pipes, and a heavy feeling, as if the air was thicker down there. That's when we found the records. The old man from the morgue was named Arthur. He was 82 years old, with no living relatives, and had been admitted there by a nephew who never showed up again. According to the few remaining papers, he had agitation problems and needed physical restraint. But in the end, no one came for him when the place went bankrupt. He and the others were forgotten, locked in the dark until they stopped breathing. As I looked at those chains, I felt a chill on the back of my neck. Something was watching me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there, just the shadow of a figure passing by the door, just like the one on the camera. The officer next to me widened his eyes. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice coming out hoarse. I didn't answer, because at that moment one thing became clear. That shadow wasn't a reflection, it wasn't a camera defect. It was something that had come with Arthur, something that had been trapped with him in that chain. We returned to the morgue that night, the police chief and I, to finish the documentation. But when we opened the refrigerator door, Arthur's body was no longer there. The examination table had been dragged as if someone, or something, had pulled it with force. And on the floor, drag marks leading to the back door. The security camera didn't catch anything, just a blur of static, and then silence. The case was closed as death by neglect, and the nursing home was eventually condemned in court. But no one explained the disappearance of the body. No one explained the shadow. To this day, when I'm alone in the morgue, I sometimes feel a chill, as if something were there, in the darkest corner, waiting. And when the lights flicker, I don't look, because I'm afraid of what I might see, or what might be watching me. And if you've stayed with me this far, I think you've realized that horror stories in morgues aren't just about fear. They're about that chill that makes us question whether the dead really stay where they should. If this kind of story also grips you, subscribe to the channel, because there's much more coming. And to let me know you made it to the end, comment below. Silent Morgue. Let's see who really has the courage. Oh, and don't forget to like, okay? After all, after everything we've been through together in this video, I think it deserves it. And hey, there's a video right here that's just perfect for you to continue in this dark vibe. Click and meet me there. I'll be waiting for you.